we have this report from TASS news agency that talks on Ukraine in Istanbul are scheduled to begin at 10 o'clock local time, which is also coincides with the Moscow time. The start of the talks on Ukraine in Istanbul, which will take place in the working office of Turkish President Dolmabahce, that's the name of that palace, I guess, is scheduled for approximately 10 o'clock local time, coincides with their Moscow time. Talks will be held behind the closed doors for the press. A source told the TASS news agency, and Russian delegation, according to also TASS news agency, has already arrived for talks in Istanbul. And if you are wondering who will be in Russian delegations, because in recent days there was speculations on this matter, some experts were suggesting that maybe even President of Russian Federation, Vladimir Putin, will travel to Istanbul for these direct talks, but I was skeptical of that from the beginning. You know this, and I was correct in my skepticism. Of course, Putin will not travel to Turkey. Sometime in the future, maybe, but not for these opening talks, let's say, in negotiations between Moscow and Kiev. But Putin yesterday authorized, basically, approve composition of Russian delegation. And let me give you some names, dear friends. So Russian President Vladimir Putin has approved the composition of the Russian delegation for negotiations with Ukraine. The Kremlin website reported Putin signed the order on the composition of the delegation of the Russian Federation for negotiations with Ukraine to approve the following composition of the delegation of the Russian Federation for negotiations with Ukraine. Vladimir Medinsky, aide to the President of the Russian Federation, will be leading the delegation. And he was leading the delegation in 2022 also, by the way, during talks in March-April, during which preliminary agreements were even reached between Moscow and Kiev delegations, but then globalists and globalist puppets from Collective West get engaged in a whole story, and they derail quite effectively the escalation. We'll remember Boris Johnson, at the time Prime Minister of UK, traveled to Kiev to derail, specifically to derail any agreement and any talks between Moscow and Kiev. Also, according to a number of reports, leadership of US CIA and State Department, also Pentagon, were traveling to Kiev for very same reason, to derail any potential de-escalation, and unfortunately they succeed in this. But let's see what will come out from these talks now in 2025. So Vladimir Medinsky will lead the Russian delegation. Also, Mikhail Galuzin, Deputy Minister of the Foreign Affairs of the Russian Federation, will be a member of the delegation. Also, Igor Kostyukov, Chief of Main Directorate of the General Staff of the Russian Armed Forces, going to be a member of delegation. And there also another member of delegation is Alexander Fomin, Deputy Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation. The composition of experts, and it's not just these four personalities that will be in a delegation. 4 experts also will travel with them and will participate in these talks. So composition of experts has also been approved and includes Zorin Alexander, First Deputy Chief of Information of the Directorate of the General Staff of the Russian Armed Forces, Podobrevskaya Yelena, Deputy Chief of the Directorate of the President of the Russian Federation of State Policy in the Humanitarian Sphere. Also Polishchuk Alexei, Director of the Second Department of the CIS countries of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Russia, and Shevtsov Viktor, Deputy Chief of the Main Directorate of International Military Cooperation of the Ministry of Defense of Russia. So This is the composition of Russian delegation, which is already in Istanbul, and their talks are scheduled to begin, as I already mentioned, at 10 o'clock this morning Moscow time, or the local time in Istanbul. Times are coincide. We are in the same time zone. And before I will publish this this update, most likely talks already going to be going to start, and let's see what will come out of it. I'm not really optimistic. I don't think we should expect any breakthroughs. Definitely not at this point, especially because globalists and globalist puppet regimes in the collective West, in Europe, for example, namely UK, France, Germany, and in some others, are not happy about these talks, although they are unable to confront Washington directly, because and if they want to derail these talks, they have to confront Washington, because it seems like Trump, president of US, is on board with Russian President Vladimir Putin on topic of these direct talks. But Trump himself will not go to Turkey, although earlier he himself stated that he might actually travel. So Reuters reported that Trump will avoid traveling to Turkey. US President Donald Trump will not travel to Istanbul to participate in the talks between Russia and Ukraine, Reuters reported, citing unnamed US official. According to source, Trump planned to travel to Turkey if President Vladimir Putin was a part of the Russian delegation. I mean, come on, man. How he could seriously consider or think that Russian president will participate in opening talks? I mean, this is just too, I don't know. People that are in charge in position of power in the West are just, with quite specific intellect, by the way, to say the least, Anyways, Kommersant newspaper is reporting that, especially in way of U.S. President Steve Witkoff and their head of State Department, Marco Rubio, are planning to arrive in Istanbul on May 16th. So they will also not be around today's talks in Istanbul, which is maybe one of the reasons why Foreign Minister of Russian Federation did not lead their delegation. If there was a meeting arranged between Rubio and the Russian foreign minister, then in that case I can see Russian foreign minister traveling in Istanbul. But obviously, to have a conversation with some mediocre representatives of Western-backed terrorist regime of Zelensky, Russian foreign minister would not travel to Turkey. Only if Rubio would be there to, exchange opinions. But yet again, by the way, Rubio is a neocon, isn't it? Rubio is a neocon, and whenever Rubio is engaged in anything, one should not expect any positive results, I think. Rubio, Kat Kellogg, and a number of other elements in Trump's administration are clearly a distraction and should be removed from their positions if Trump really wants to get rid of influence of neocons. But is he serious about neutralizing neocons' influence? I don't think so. Let me add, dear friends, to this short video from today's first update additional information that is available for this moment, for 1:30 in the middle of the day by Moscow time, which is that according to statement of official representative of Russian Foreign Ministry, Maria Zakharova, Turkish side asked to postpone beginning of their direct talks between Moscow and Kiev for second half of the day, and obviously Russian side accept this. And also interesting news, I think, that Zelensky, this head of Western-backed terrorist regime in Kiev, while arriving in Turkey, almost straight away, once he left plane, made insulting statements towards Russian delegation. He called the Russian delegation sham and not serious. question qualification of Russian delegation, which is definitely indicator that Zelensky is acting under orders of his globalist masters, and he plans to derail direct talks with Russian delegation. This is my impression, by the way. Let's see how situation will develop during the day. But at least for this moment, we have this additional information that Zelensky was very insulting towards Russian delegation. So much so that, Maria Zakharova, spokeswoman of the Russian Foreign Ministry, had to react and call him a clown, which he is actually. And also talks itself, due to this unclear position of Kiev regime, is being postponed towards the second half of the day by Turkish side, under request of Turkish side, and which is mediating, as far as I understand. And it is highly likely that due to attitude of Zelensky, talks between Russian and Ukrainian delegations may not even happen today. Maybe talks will be postponed for tomorrow, or who knows, if Russian delegation will think that Kiev regime is not intends to have a meaningful dialogue, then and Russian representatives may just come back to Russia. But for sure, they will stay in Istanbul at least for today. Obviously, if any additional information, I will report about it during the live stream today on my Rumble channel and on my Telegram and Twitter X pages during the day. Okay, this is it for now.